Hi there, everybody, and welcome to What's Next. I'm Sam Golden.
I am Daniel Fogg.
And today we're going to be diving into the big stories driving crypto economics and the world, exploring what they mean and asking what's next. Let's do it.
Go.
Okay, first of all, we couldn't kick off the episode without talking about this. The global markets are tumbling, and it's all because of this receding hairline right here. Daniel, what's happening in the world? What are we looking at?
There has been so much that's happened over the last week or two that is economic in nature, perhaps connects into AI, and certainly is starting to impact the crypto markets. So we wanted to look at 2 or 3 big things that have happened over the last 7 days that are really shaking things up in the world of blockchain. So I think the first thing we wanted to talk about is the strategic crypto reserve. Sam, explain to us what happened here, and then I'll give my take.
Yeah, I'm still juddering a little bit at the fact it's not a strategic Bitcoin reserve, and we'll dive into that a little bit later on. But yeah, I mean, on Sunday afternoon, Donald Trump announced on Truth Social that the US would be establishing a crypto reserve, including a number of different tokens, primarily Bitcoin, Ethereum, Ripple, XRP, Solana, and Cardano's ADA token as well, all made in the USA tokens when it comes to XRP, Sol, and ADA, allegedly, despite 2 of them having foundations in Switzerland, but we'll get into that later. And yeah, of course, Bitcoin and Ethereum at the heart of it. And as you can imagine, crypto Twitter and Bitcoin Twitter have been having some heated discussions about what this means. Was this the right approach? And what the outcome will be.
So I think the argument for a Bitcoin reserve is a little bit out there, but actually does make quite a lot of sense if you presume that the global economy is becoming increasingly digital. Bitcoin's original use case was digital gold, and I think certainly over recent years, that use case has proved to be pretty good for long-term holders of Bitcoin. And so, obviously, with a significant number of crypto advocates in the White House, from the kind of perhaps more serious, like David Sachs, to the perhaps less serious, which would be Donald Trump's family and the launch of the Trump coin through Liberty Finance, something like this was probably going to happen. I think that what we have seen, the idea of a Bitcoin crypto reserve has now become a crypto reserve in general, and there is a whole swathe of these other tokens which, I mean, let's just be very frank here, they are of highly speculative long-term value, and that's saying something. I think the charitable case here for what's actually happening is this is an intentional overreach as a negotiation tactic, which will then be rowed back to just Bitcoin and Ethereum or just Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm.
That's the charitable explanation of what's actually going on here. But I can say for sure that, prominent voices in the US crypto ecosystem, people who have built the biggest exchanges in America, like Brian Armstrong, people who've invested in many of the most successful crypto projects like Naval Ravikant and Tyler Winklevoss, and one obviously with his brother, the co-founder of Gemini, who's been extremely long Bitcoin and crypto for a very long time, are sending, should we say, diplomatic but also quite direct messages about this. Let's just pull some of these out because they are quite funny. I think, honestly, Naval's is the clearest. The idea that taxpayers should not be exit liquidity for cryptocurrencies that are decentralized in name only, i.e. ADA and XRP and Sol, is pretty on the nose, but really, frankly, it's my view as well. I mean, Brian Armstrong, slightly more diplomatic, basically saying, hey, this is great, this is happening, but, probably just Bitcoin is probably the better option.
And what's really interesting is a lot of these guys, both Tyler and Brian Armstrong, obviously they will benefit financially from a strategic reserve, including more than just Bitcoin. But fundamentally, they, as we've been talking about, they don't see these 2 things shouldn't be together. Like, I understand the logic behind a Bitcoin reserve in the same form as like Fort Knox holding all of the gold reserves of the United States, but then just throwing in some other, I guess the equivalents are potentially equities in companies or stocks alongside that just doesn't make sense. Like, they're 2 different things here.
Seems quite arbitrary as well. I mean, no shade on many of the teams building out some of these projects, but
For sure.
ADA is a bit of a strange suggestion, as is XRP. Yeah, not really. To be very honest with you, I'm not sure what's going on here. I think a less charitable description is there's a bit of an insider grift going on. So let's see how this plays out. And maybe this moves us on to the next thing we wanted to discuss, which was this remarkable situation one day beforehand. So on the 1st of March, somebody out there, some trader, used $4 million with 50x leverage, which is an absolutely staggering amount of risk they're taking on here, to build a 198 million Bitcoin position and a 72 million ETH position.
Insane.
This is a day before the strategic crypto reserve was announced. And you can see down here, if you look at the unrealized P&L, up $5 million 24 hours later. This is such a huge amount of risk that this user took that the conclusion many have come to is there is insider trading going on here. There was privileged information that was shared in advance of the announcement. And genuinely, I think this ends in legal action for somebody at some point. At some point, there'll be an ethics investigation of how this got out and to whom, and somebody might end up in chains.
Yeah, it's either incredible foresight or something shiftier going on here.
I mean, do you take that amount of financial risk if you don't have foresight?
The degens in the trenches love taking risks, so maybe, but it does feel like a pretty radical and bold bet. And it isn't throwing a few $1,000s into 10 different meme coins, hoping one of them moons. It's two stable assets when you're talking about crypto with Ethereum and Bitcoin. So it does feel like there's something here. And I know we're not the only ones feeling this way as well, because there's a lot of people posting about it. Great coincidence.
Yeah, I mean, let's back up here for a second. Nothing wrong with speculating on the direction of assets. I mean, a lot of what crypto is built on is speculation. And that's all good. That's how you pull capital and liquidity in to allow you to build out the networks, build out the protocols. Nothing wrong with that. Pretty intense going 50x. Would not recommend at all. I mean, generally, I would personally never recommend anybody use leverage who is a sort of prosumer crypto trader, because you're taking on enormous risk. Yeah, if you find yourself on the other side of that, you could be in a bad situation. None of this is financial advice, if that is not entirely clear.
Yeah, just look at Wall Street Bets on Reddit to see the kind of insane losses and big, tricky situations people get into using this amount of leverage. Yeah, it's pretty mad.
Yeah, in fact, and shout out to Coinfessions on Twitter, which is an anonymous Dropbox for people confessing some of the good and bad things that have happened to them in crypto. It is a deep mine. I think just to kind of back up here for a second, there's nothing wrong with that. I think what we're addressing here is this does not help the crypto industry if there is US administration connected insider trading going on, front running these kind of public announcements. It's pretty. I think this is pretty disgraceful, personally.
Yeah, especially after Trump coin and Melania coin as well. Like, did we think it could get any worse? But here we are. Let's zoom a little bit out now. We're diving into the crypto market, but the wider US markets and global markets have also been kind of shuddering a little bit this week with some of the other announcements that Trump has been making. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what we're seeing here?
Yeah, so Trump's quite big on tariffs. I mean, we're not going to play this video, but this is an amazing live shot from Fox News from yesterday, 3rd of March, where Donald Trump was announcing that the tariffs that had been suspended for 30 days or put on hold for 30 days on both Mexico and Canada, two of the US's biggest trading partners, were actually now going to land, going to happen. So back on 25% on each, if I'm not mistaken, and then adding an additional 10% onto China on top of the 10% that was added, I think, a month ago. And while he was making this announcement, the Dow Watch ticker in the bottom right started absolutely cranking. You could see people running for the hills and capital flowing out of the Dow Jones. It was pretty, it's pretty wild scenario. So maybe let's take a little look at what's been going on here. So why this matters and why this is impacting crypto is important. Very simply, the US's three largest trading partners, China, Canada, and Mexico, have a massive trade deficit with the US. That means that Trump is trying to increase the cost of goods from those countries coming into America. That should then, in theory, make domestically produced goods by comparison cheaper, which then pulls basically consumers buy domestically produced goods instead of foreign produced goods. And that should, in theory, address the trade balance, right? That's the kind of simplified logic of what's going on here. Okay, so China, EU, Mexico on there, and also Canada a little bit lower down the bottom. Interesting to note the surplus, graph in the FT here. UK, Hong Kong, UAE, Netherlands, and Australia actually in surplus, i.e. The balance is in the other direction on the books. So what's actually in the exports going from Canada, Mexico, and China into America? Again, another nice graphic from the FT here. Now, there's obviously a hell of a lot, but it's no surprise to see what the biggest are. So from Canada, it is predominantly mineral fuels, oil, and raw materials. Some relatively advanced manufacturing as well. So mechanical appliances, aluminium, vehicles and automotive. So there's kind of nearshoring happening from the US vehicles and automotive industries going into Canada. Similar with Mexico, massive pink bubble on the left there, vehicle and automotive components. Again, machinery, mechanical appliances, and electrical equipment. Again, the interlinkages, these are incredibly complex supply chains, vehicles, and the amount of cross-border and flows that happen in order to build one car in America are enormous. So by adding these tariffs on, it is going to affect the price of everything from basically everything, because not you can see it in the vehicles that consumers will buy, but because a lot of it is also going into fuels and raw materials, it will trickle down into all parts, probably, maybe instead of, I'm not sure if agriculture will be quite as hit, but all parts of the US economy.
Yeah, so what you're saying here with Mexico, for example, is the components being brought into the United States will have the tariff added onto it. The car is then manufactured in the United States. The manufacturer of the car has to absorb the cost of bringing those components in.
And has a choice.
Yeah.
Do you absorb the cost and eat the loss, or do you pass the cost on to consumers directly?
Yeah, so it's much more complicated than the original kind of reasoning that you explained behind why someone might want to do this.
And if you think of it just in a simplistic example, if you think of the cost of manufacture going up, that means the margins of, let's say, a car company are being squeezed, which then could create a justification to, for example, lay some people off, right? So the knock-on effects right across the economy are dramatic. Truthfully, I think I understand the arguments that the Trump administration is making here, but I think they are short-sighted. I mean, and again, just to be clear, the claim that's been made as to why this is happening is to stop the inflow of fentanyl into the US.
Interesting.
It's a spurious political cover, if you ask me. So this is what's happening. And as a result of this, risk assets are selling hard. I think the next image shows if I'm not mistaken, should show the CoinDesk. It should be the CoinDesk 20, but for some reason there's only 15 in there. You can see over the last 24 hours, we have seen the pristine assets of Bitcoin and to a certain extent Ethereum dropping by 10%, and then a widespread sell-off, 16% Solana, 17% Cardano, 10% wrapped Bitcoin. Now, the amusing and tragedy of this is reversing the impact that the strategic crypto reserve announcement had only 24, 48 hours later.
Yeah.
So there was this massive rally in the whole crypto market, especially in those tokens that were listed. Then we saw a massive crash as a result of the tariff announcement. And this is 2025 in the markets, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, life comes at you fast.
A lot more ups and downs. It's coming out as fast. It's coming out as fast. So yeah, there's a hell of a lot going on here. Meanwhile, there is some good news, right? I guess if you think about the think about the sort of balance of power and the role that technology is playing with it increasingly. Shall I just roll us straight into this one, Sam?
Yeah, let's dive in.
This is an image of a fab, a factory, if you will, that's used to manufacture chips by TSMC in Arizona that was agreed to be built during the Biden administration as part of the CHIPS Act. And as part of a $65 billion commitment that TSMC made to the US during that period. I think yesterday there was another announcement, which is an additional $100 billion of investment is going to go in. So 3 more facilities, 1 R&D, an advanced packaging facilities, and I believe another fab as well. So what's going on here? So TSMC are the largest manufacturer of cutting-edge chips in the world. The most complex form of chips that are manufactured, TSMC makes 90% of them globally, right? So they are the monopoly. These chips go into everything from mobile phones and computers to cars, rockets, aeroplanes,
fridges.
They are an essential. They're an essential resource in every part of any advanced economy. The issue, what's going on in the background here, is not just the investment, the inward direct investment from, in this case, Taiwan, and it's a bit more complex than that, but let's say Taiwan for simplicity's sake, into the US. But apparently this represents the largest single foreign direct investment in US history.
Wow.
Why they want to make it, or why the US wants this to happen, they want onshoring of the advanced chip manufacturing, because there is widespread concern that as most of these are made in Taiwan, that a conflict between China and Taiwan, which is looking increasingly likely, over the whether Taiwan is or isn't a independent sovereign nation, or whether it is or isn't part of China, would have a massive knock-on effect on global chip supply chains, would prevent the US to manufacture not just all of the things that kind of run its economy and the advanced components that we all rely on in our everyday lives, but also the airplanes, the aircraft carriers, the missiles, the rockets, the AI systems that are increasingly becoming part of the kind of global strategic battle. So this represents not just a economic boon for America, jobs, investment, manufacturing, all of that kind of stuff, but also a geostrategic play to make sure that the US is hedged against the China-Taiwan conflict.
Yeah, I mean, agree with it or disagree with it, the whole kind of America first stance that Trump takes, you can see it carrying across a lot of the different things we're talking about here, like bringing these jobs and this manufacturing into the US, whether it was already kind of in place with Biden or not. The strategic crypto reserve, including cryptos that were founded or led by teams that were based in the US, and lots of the other stuff that he's working on, it really kind of focuses on bringing all of these things back into the United States.
I mean, it's a clear vision. Whether it is being executed in a sophisticated way and whether the downside of doing this is being properly factored in. I mean, many much smarter and more informed people than me believe that is not the case. And we're going to have to watch and see what happens over the coming months and years as this starts to reshape our economic world.
Yeah, hark back to 1980s Britain with the grand plan of becoming a service-led industry without really thinking about the fact you need to train people on this stuff and not just close down their livelihoods and move everything into London. So probably another discussion for another day, but that's another kind of example, I guess, of something that on paper seems quite simple and obvious. We're a small nation. Let's focus on high value output when there's other areas of the world that can do different things for us. But as we've seen from what's happening in the UK right now, it doesn't always work out the way that people think. On that cheery note,
the world is untangling. I mean, look, why are we talking about this, and why do we think this is relevant to people that follow the Rootstock ecosystem and the work at Rootstock Labs? Because this is fundamental context to what's happening, not just in the crypto markets, but the changing global techno-economic landscape. And it's moving so quick at the moment, and so much of it is connected into US politics fundamentally, that it is shaping what is getting built out, what use cases are being used, what crypto tokens and what networks are growing and dropping. And we find it super interesting, and hopefully you guys do too. We're now going to take you into Rootstock because there's some stuff that is not entirely detached from this going on in our world.
Exactly. Decentralized infrastructure. Let's dive in. But first of all, Daniel, do you know what this is?
Is it an apple tree? Peach tree?
It's a peach tree. Do you know why I'm showing you a peach tree?
I do.
So, as is great tradition with every single major release on the Rootstock network, the core contributors always name it after a different type of rootstock. And this is the Lovell rootstock that was used to grow these beautiful peach trees. We're talking about this because the Lovell network upgrade just went live on testnet a couple of days ago. And on the 13th of March, we'll hit mainnet. Loads of stuff to dive into here. Loads of different RSK IPs, which are the improvement proposals of the Rootstock network that were discussed as part of this upgrade, and a ton of really big ones that were included. I'm not going to dive into all of them because it would take ages. I'll dive into a few, then I'd love to get your take on some of this as well, Daniel. So I think, first of all, what's really interesting here is a big push towards further decentralization of the network. That is done with a couple of different things. One of them is the groundwork has been laid in the Lovell network upgrade to expand the number of pegnatories that play a big role in the bridge that links Bitcoin and Rootstock from 7 today to over 60. Daniel, I don't know if you want to add anything onto that before I kind of dive into some of the other things that came out of Lovell or that will come out of Lovell.
Yeah, I mean, a lot has been said about the PowerPeg, its design, how while it relies on the multi-sig architecture of Bitcoin, the PowerPeg itself is not a multi-sig. Today, there are a whole number of pegnatories involved in moving Bitcoin between the Bitcoin network and Rootstock. Moving in the conceptual sense, locking on Bitcoin and unlocking on Rootstock. I think that this move to try and get up to 60 pegnatories operating the PowerPeg is important, and it touches on something which I think is often misunderstood, which is that decentralization, there is no final state. It is an ideal. It is not a destination. It's a journey, and every network needs to continue to advance in its path towards decentralization. And we and the core contributors to Rootstock are really pushing hard to make the PowerPeg even more decentralized than it is today. Just as a reminder, the PowerPeg's been up and running for over 7 years. It's never gone down. It's never been hacked. It is the most performant Bitcoin bridge in existence today, but we think we can make it a lot better. So this is a big unlock. Now, this is separate from the fact that Rootstock and the core contributors to the network, so Rootstock Labs and the core contributors to the network are going to be launching the Union Bridge based on the BitVMX architecture later in 2025. So there will be 2 bridge architectures in operation by the end of the year. But I think fundamentally it's an indication that we are not dropping the PowerPeg. We still think it is a remarkable piece of technology. It has stood the test of time. We just want to make it even more decentralized than it is today. I'm obviously biased, but from my point of view, how many pegnatories do you need? If they're fully attested, it's publicly clear who they are, then I think at a certain point, it is decentralized enough for massive amounts of capital to flow into the network.
100%, especially when you consider that's just one of the layers of this defense in depth approach to how the PowerPeg secured. So these pegnatories themselves do not have private keys that they can look at or use. They are holding hardware security modules that have encrypted private keys within them, tamper-proof modules that they cannot open up. And then even those devices on their own don't sign transactions that allow the flow of Bitcoin in and out of Rootstock. There also has to be a cumulative amount of Bitcoin's hash power powering these devices for it to happen. So those different layers, like as you said, Daniel, I think when it comes together, it makes the PowerPeg this really unstoppable, uncensorable bridge as it exists today. I think it's super exciting with Union coming down the line as well, but this is already here. People are already using it. And that's one big development here.
So a lot better.
Exactly, yeah. So that's one big thing that comes with the Lovell network upgrade is the fact that we're laying the groundwork for pegnatories to increase from around 7 today up to 60, perhaps even more in the future. Another big push as part of the kind of core devs goal to make Rootstock the easiest and best place to build on Bitcoin is more EVM compatibility. We can't get enough EVM compatibility. You're going to be telling us we don't want any more EVM compatibility by the end of this, to echo Donald Trump slightly. Yeah, I'm not going to dive into details of this, but basically the core contributors have been looking at the most used and most useful parts of the EVM development over the last kind of 6 months and made sure they're included in Rootstock. So everything you can do on Ethereum today, you can now build on Bitcoin using Rootstock, which is super exciting. And along those lines as well, there's also been a lot of work to improve how smart contracts are deployed on Rootstock. Again, too technical for me to dive into. It essentially makes it more efficient to deploy and use smart contracts on the network. So ultimately, cheaper ways to use apps, faster apps to use, less transactions required for the same activity you want to do within those protocols. Loads of good stuff there, and lots more. But one of the things that I'm really excited about that comes at the same time as the Lovell upgrade and has been a kind of collaboration between some of the core contributors to Rootstock and also the Bitcoin miners that secure the network is in the last kind of 10 days, transaction fees have been cut by 60%. So it's now way cheaper to interact with any app or smart contract on Rootstock. And this is super cool. I'm sure you've seen this already, Daniel, but super exciting development.
Yeah, live on the network today, massive drop in fees, making it, as you say, much cheaper and much easier for people to engage with Rootstock. I think this was quite a big collective effort, as you say, across the ecosystem with the miners very heavily involved. Huge thanks to everybody that made this happen. Rootstock has now just become a lot more competitive than any other Bitcoin L2. So yeah, really, really cool. Massive, massive change for the network. And yeah, hopefully we're going to see more adoption and more usage as a result of this.
Yeah, super exciting. I was mentioning this earlier to you, Daniel, but I was looking at the Rootstock Collective DAO, voting on a proposal for a decentralized grant earlier, and it was less than 10 cents to vote on that proposal, which is super exciting to see. And this isn't the end. There's more fee smoothing coming. There's more work to do to reduce those transaction fees even further, but this is a really exciting first step. And if you're interested to dive into this data, this is from BlockScout's Rootstock Explorer, which gives you a breakdown of live transaction fees. It helps you understand where you can get gas for the network from in the form of RBTC, and loads more information on Rootstock as well. So big shout out to the BlockScout crew for building what I think is one of the best explorers out there.
All right, there's lots more stuff going on. So Sam, lead us into this a little bit, and I'll explain some cool things that I think have happened that are interesting for people to hear.
Yeah, so some of you may have already heard this on the latest Rootstock Summit, but recently Layer Zero announced that they have integrated Rootstock into their network. With that comes all of the apps that use Layer Zero's technology to provide bridges between different blockchains can now support Rootstock. So many of them have already added support and many more are adding support in the future. What does this mean? Two things, and then maybe, Daniel, you'll dive into it a little bit more. One, it means assets on Rootstock can now go multi-chain, starting with RIF and RBTC. They have already been bridged into other networks, and people can do what they want to move RIF and RBTC outside of Rootstock around the wider world of crypto and back into Rootstock, the home of DeFi on Bitcoin. And the second really exciting thing here is the reverse of that, which is assets from hundreds, the top 20 leading blockchains can now be bridged into Rootstock. Maybe you want to take us a little bit into what that means, Daniel.
Yeah, so Layer Zero is a cross-chain messaging protocol. In order to use Layer Zero, there's an interface called Stargate. And as of a couple of days ago, because you can now bridge assets in from 3 networks today, Ethereum, Arbitrum, and Base, and very soon Solana. I believe Solana is going live literally in the next 24, 48 hours. This means that we have a canonically bridged USDC asset that can now be bridged into Rootstock from Ethereum or any other chain. So why does this matter? So stablecoins are an absolutely essential part of crypto ecosystems. There are 2 big stablecoins. There's USDT, created and supplied by Tether, and there's USDC, created and supplied by Circle, a spin out, I believe, from Coinbase back in the day. They have quite different characteristics. governed under different jurisdictions, different designs, and they have a sort of different flavor. Certain types of users, certain geographies, certain networks tend to be more closely associated with one than the other. The famous rather, USDT on Tron use case means that you can access and send US dollars anywhere in the world for a tiny, tiny fee. And the adoption of USDT and Tron has been absolutely massive, primarily for what we call everyday DeFi use cases, in particular remittance flows in emerging markets. But getting USDT, getting Tether to do a native integration on any chain is extremely difficult. I believe they had something like 9 or 10 chains live, and they actually have started shutting down chains. So there's less chains for USDT. So there wasn't a path there for Rootstock. So as part of some of our work in the ecosystem, we had a number of discussions with Circle, and it's become clear, and they sort of made this public about 18 months ago, that the path to USDC on any network is for them to have a canonically bridged version of the token. Adoption can then be measured and monitored over time, and then that creates a pathway through to a native implementation. So Circle is implementing USDC on way more networks than Tether is implementing USDT on. So it's clear there's a path there. And we're starting to see the beginnings of a concentration of liquidity in USDC on Rootstock. So this is super exciting. It's going to be a long journey until a natively issued USDC is possible on the network. But this bridging mechanism that Layer Zero has brought has meant that this can now happen. And from some of the conversations I've had with people across the ecosystem over the last week, people are super excited about this. People like USDC. It's got, as a product, it's got great product market fit. People are familiar with it. They trust it. It's regulated. And I think it's going to fly. So I'm super excited. I was one of the first USDC into Rootstock bridges and started sort of throwing some around to some people I know in the ecosystem. We had a lot of fun with that a couple of days ago. So it might seem like a small thing. An asset can now move from one network to another, but what that asset is, the premium USDC, US dollar stablecoin, and what the network is, the best, longest running, and most secure Bitcoin sidechain, we think this is the beginning of something really exciting. So
super exciting.
I'm jacked.
Super pumped. And the one of the great things about Stargate as well is, great, you're going to bridge your USDC from Ethereum into Rootstock, but what about gas when you get to the other side? Well, the cool thing about Stargate is that in the same transaction, you can bridge that USDC into Rootstock and receive RBTC for your gas as part of the transaction. So let's say you're transferring $100 of USDC into Rootstock, you may get $95 of USDC and $5 of Bitcoin in the form of RBTC that you can then use to interact with all the apps on the network or make swaps of your USDC or whatever you want to do. So definitely worth checking out the stuff that the Stargate team has built using Layer Zero as well, because it's super cool. All right,
awesome. We've got some other things happening on the network. So as has been kind of widely discussed on all the various different Rootstock social channels, the Rootstock Collective was launched back in late September, early October in 2024. This is an ecosystem scaling DAO, increasingly taking over the role to accelerate the growth of the Rootstock ecosystem and increase the decentralization of Rootstock. So we are tracking very carefully the RIF that is being staked, that staked RIF. So again, just the flow here is that you get access to RIF tokens, stake them in the DAO. That then gives you the opportunity to vote on ecosystem growth initiatives, for example, like grants, like marketing campaigns. But then you can also enter into the builders incentive market, also known as collective rewards, which allows you, in combination with a really nice piece of game theory, in combination with the builders, these are the protocols building out the Rootstock ecosystem, to share in the amount of transaction fees and rewards that those builders and backers are receiving for their participation in growing Rootstock. So we're tracking very carefully the amount of RIF that's being staked, and a really important milestone happened just a couple of days ago, which is 12 million RIF is now staked in the collective. A couple of things about this that are kind of worth touching on. Firstly, this is a 100% growth from when the network launched from when the protocol launched back in October. It is Today, about 1% of total Rift supply is now actively staked in the collective. And yeah, super exciting. I mean, I've got a couple of more notes on this that are worth sharing. Why the collective was launched is we basically wanted to solve the value capture challenge for Bitcoin builders. That is that if you build a Bitcoin sidechain where Bitcoin is the native gas token, the growth and success of that network is not something that the builders can participate in, because there is no asset that increases and decreases based on the success of the network. So RIF, staked in the collective, is a mechanism to solve that problem. Sam, what else is kind of worth sharing here?
Yeah, it's super cool and really exciting to see that like huge step up of growth recently, especially after the launch of collective rewards. I think you covered a lot of it. What's really great about the Rootstock Collective is you have members that are builders building on Bitcoin using Rootstock, and then you have active members of the Rootstock community who want to help shape and share in the success of the growth of Bitcoin DeFi on Rootstock. And the DAO is the place to do that. So through backer rewards, you're seeing both the builders and the backers of those projects receiving rewards paid in Bitcoin in the form of RBTC and Rift tokens as well. So people can really kind of actively participate in the way the network grows and the direction it goes in. As you mentioned, that's everything from decentralized grants. So I want to fund this really cool team building this amazing thing on Bitcoin using Rootstock, to I'm already building on Bitcoin using Rootstock, and I would like to launch a marketing campaign at ETH Denver or whatever it might be. These are the kind of proposals that come into the DAO and the community kind of rallies around to vote on. And it's been really exciting to see. We've seen both the Rootstock Collective Telegram channel, where a lot of this early discussion kind of happens, and the Rootstock Discord really explode in kind of usage and conversations around how can I access funding to build my project? How can I support a project that I love on the network? So really good to see. And actually just a shout out to Footprint Analytics and our network, who published the graph you can see on your screen right now as well, who have been tracking and reporting on the development of the DAO over the last few months as well. Really, really cool to see.
Amazing stuff. The Rootstock Collective continues to grow and continues to be the example of how a decentralized ecosystem enabled by tokens and decentralized protocol technology can be used to grow an ecosystem independent of any centralized entity. All right, very cool. What else, Sam? What's next?
What's next? Let's zoom back out of Rootstock and into the wider world of Web3. I think probably most people watching recognize this slightly concerned looking face. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what happened here,
Bad day
Daniel?
at the office for bad day at the office for Ben. So this is just an indication of how fast things move in the crypto markets. I think this was about 10 or 11 days ago. The largest crypto hack in history, $1.4 billion worth of ETH was taken out of a multi-sig wallet, which Bybit, predominantly Asian crypto exchange, was using. I think it's been widely reported. There is direct evidence now that this was a hack associated with the Lazarus Group, the North Korean state-sponsored hacking collective. Some of the reports I saw was that this was a classic social engineering hack using LinkedIn to attract developers, get them to download a file as part of a test for a job interview, which then compromised, from what I understand, the UI of the safe. So originally Gnosis safe, but now used on Ethereum as well. The safe interface for multi-signature wallets. Apparently this was I had it referred to as like a hot cold storage wallet. I'm not entirely sure what that means. But essentially this processed a $1.4 billion exit of ETH, and then you could watch live as the hacker was dumping, I think if I'm not mistaken, 20,000 ETH at a time into Asian exchanges, converting them into Bitcoin, and then essentially dispersing them and laundering them. Completely wild. But this has been widely reported. I think what's more interesting is reflecting on this now, and this may still happen, but reflecting on this now, when this has happened in the past with FTX, with Mt. Gox, it has led to a total meltdown, the shutdown of the exchange. But this has not happened A couple of reasons for that. Sam, we think this is interesting from a comms and risk management perspective, don't we?
Yeah, I mean, there's loads of stuff to dive into here. As you mentioned, I think it's pretty incredible that Bybit, well, one, didn't go down, two, actually jumped to communicate pretty much instantly on a live stream about what was happening to their users. And they didn't pause transactions. So I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but billions were withdrawn from Bybit after this. And they processed all the transactions. They said, this is fine. We have the reserves to be able to support this. We saw
took a loan for the ETH.
Took a
they
loan.
Took a massive loan for the ETH.
Yeah, from another exchange.
Was used to slowly, from another exchange, was used to then slowly make good the ETH holders who had lost their capital.
Yeah, really cool. And you saw a lot of the other big players in the industry, including some, I guess, competitors, other exchanges, for offering their kind of support to Bybit in this incident. I think Bybit did an amazing job of actually just communicating with the audience. They didn't disappear. They didn't have all the answers. So they hopped on a live stream and said, let's figure it out together, which is a good way of saying it.
Sam, tell me, so in a previous life, you were an expert, and you still are an expert, but you worked in crisis comms management. Tell me why this was good.
So it's really interesting because I think actually the world of crisis comms has changed dramatically with the kind of emergence of real-time social media and streaming. This is almost the new playbook. It's like you need to be reassuring, communicating with your customers as soon as possible. You need to be providing the information that you have about the incident to them so they can understand what's happening. And also, as they did throughout, it's about reassuring the user that this is under control. It's definitely not a great day. It's like you said, it's a bad day at the office, but we'll be able to figure out what's happening here. And the other really interesting thing that happened through this incident is people like Zach XBT, the kind of cryptocurrency sleuth, was brought on board by Bybit to actually track these funds. So you almost get the whole community rallying around Bybit, whereas maybe a few years ago, everyone would have been slating the exchange. But by putting a face to the brand through Ben here, and by making sure that everything that was being done was being really communicated and over communicated, they did a great job of kind of like mitigating a lot of the panic. That being said, as I mentioned at the beginning, there was hundreds of millions of dollars withdrawn from the exchange. So people were clearly worried about that. But you'll probably see, but hopefully, and obviously this is still kind of like coming out in the wash now, but Bybit will continue to operate. And because of how they handled this incident, they should see continued success and growth in what they're doing.
And a slightly an interesting thing I saw is that I saw a user on Twitter note that he's wearing an activity tracker, and he posted his heart rate during the day. And I'm telling you something, this guy's a cool customer. He kept his head while all around him were losing theirs. But yeah, it's quite remarkable.
Yeah, you can see the spike when he heard the news. Yeah, there's like one big spike when he kind of heard the news, and then he just goes into the Zen state of like, I need to figure out what happened here. Very cool.
Experienced operator. That's what we like to see in our leaders. Okay, awesome. And Sam, what do you think? Did North Korea beat the US to building a strategic Bitcoin reserve here?
Well, apparently, a high percentage of the funds are now in Bitcoin. We know the Lazarus Group are essentially state-sponsored hacking organizations. Kim's got the Bitcoin and over $1 billion of it as well. Probably the only country in the world to have acquired that Bitcoin through such nefarious means. But yeah, the race is on for strategic Bitcoin reserves. Lots of different ways to acquire them.
Insane.
Insane.
Okay.
All right.
What's the final piece?
A little bit of fun to wrap things up here. Super Mario is now being used to benchmark AI. So there's a big discussion in the AI community about how do you benchmark how good a AI model is. Like, what do you mean by good? What are you trying to achieve with this? And one of the ways that people have been trying to explore how to benchmark AI is by getting it to play games. Originally, someone got AIs to play Pokemon, more of like a, I guess you can take your time playing Pokemon. It's not so fast paced. You're not getting stars fired at you and little Goombas crawling towards you. And then they thought, let's take it to the next level. Let's give these AI the challenge of playing Mario. So you can see here the 4 different kind of leading AI models at the moment were all tasked with playing Mario. The big takeaway here was like the reasoning models like OpenAI, who actually kind of like have to think about what they're doing, performed far worse than the non-reasoning models like Claude in this kind of task, because they didn't have the time to think about what to do. They had to be moving and acting.
Flow state.
Yeah, in the flow state, yeah. And I guess that probably meant that Claude made way more mistakes at first, but over time learned how to kind of deal with the environment it was in. I thought this was just a bit interesting, a little bit of fun. Yeah, we've seen like people cheating on coding interviews. I'm sure you've seen this on Twitter, Daniel. People using kind of invisible coding assistants to completely smash the pair coding test that you get as part of an interview as a software developer. Competitive esports could be next. We're going to see. I mean, maybe this is how Elon Musk is in the top Diablo players. Ock is playing for him.
I think the reason this benchmarking is interesting is it demonstrates how all these models are structured in a different way and they approach problems in different ways. And comparing and contrasting helps you understand which models are better at what. And points more to the fact that certainly today a race is still on as to which models are better at which tasks. And yeah, it's interesting to see Claude in particular doing really well. Although I did read this morning quite a mind-bending articulation from GPT 4.5 reasoning why it did or didn't believe the world is a hallucination, and the only way that hallucination has form is through consciousness. It's pretty nuts. So hey,
pretty insane.
If you
Things are going to get interesting.
For philosophy, go to ChatGPT. For games and problems and puzzles, maybe Claude's your model.
Yeah, and Gemini's the finance whiz. It's a good way of looking at it, that eventually we're going to come out of the other end, with these specialized AA models working on different problems. Very cool. Okay, I think we'll wrap things up here, Daniel, unless you've got anything else to add. Thank you, everyone, for tuning into another episode of What's Next. If you see any stories that you want to see us talk about, or you have any questions about what we've talked about today, make sure you drop us a note on Twitter at rootstock_IO, or you can find me at Golden Gatsby and Daniel
Fogg. And we are going to go live very soon. And if you made it this far to the end of the show, you are a legend. So a shitcoin for you.
Amazing. Thanks a lot, everybody. Speak soon.
Bye.